Another rotation. Another batch of soldiers needing equipment checks. Krath clicked her mandibles together in what passed for a sigh among her people, a sound echoing softly in the cavernous armor bay. The Galactic Defense Coalition station hummed around her, all sterile metal and recycled air, and here she was, stuck doing basic fitting work. Again, her compound eyes scanned the duty roster on her datapad, forearms moving in practiced coordination as she pulled up the day's assignments. Humans, of course. 3 of them scheduled for full armor recalibration before deployment. She'd heard the stories. Sure, everyone had. Humans this, humans that. But honestly, they looked soft, fragile. Their skin had no natural plating, no chitin. Nothing but that ridiculous flexible covering that bruised if you so much as bumped into a doorframe. The bay doors hissed open and Krath glanced up from her workstation. A human male walked in, alone, carrying his helmet under one arm. Tall by their species standards maybe, though still shorter than her 7-foot frame. His hair was dark, cut short in that practical military way most soldiers wore it. Standard issue undershirt, gray, clinging to his frame in a way that showed muscle definition but nothing that impressed her particularly. His identification tag read, Webb, Marcus in Galactic Standard. You Krath? He asked, his voice carrying that flat, unimpressed tone humans seem to specialize in. Tech specialist Krath, yes. She corrected, gesturing with 2 of her arms toward the fitting platform. You are, let me guess, here for armor adjustment, because the human physiology requires constant recalibration, because your species cannot maintain consistent proportions. Marcus raised one eyebrow, that peculiar human expression that could mean anything from amusement to irritation. Yeah, something like that. We're deploying in 6 hours. Got told my chest plate clearance was off by 2 centimeters. 2 centimeters. Krath's mandibles clicked again, this time in genuine annoyance. They'd pulled her from critical plasma rifle maintenance for 2 centimeters. Fine, platform. Remove your shirt. This will take 15 minutes if you cooperate. Longer if you do that thing humans do where you cannot stay still. That thing we do. Marcus stepped onto the platform, pulling his shirt over his head in one smooth motion. Yes, the fidgeting. The constant adjustment of position. The need to make conversation during technical procedures. Krath activated the platform scanning array, holographic measurements flickering to life around Marcus's torso. Her primary hands pulled the chest plate from its rack while her secondary hands began adjusting the calibration tools. I have fitted 237 soldiers this cycle. Humans are, without exception, the most difficult to work with. Maybe we're just more interesting than the others, Marcus said, that same flat tone with something underneath it. Humor? Maybe. Interesting is not the word I would use. Krath muttered, approaching with the chest plate. The armor was standard coalition issue, composite alloy rated for small arms fire and energy weapon dispersal. Heavy enough that most species needed assistance donning it. Marcus took it from her lower arms without apparent effort, holding it steady while she checked the initial positioning. Close now. She could see the details the scanner had missed. Humans were strange up close. All that exposed skin, pale in this one's case, with thin lines of old scars here and there. Fragile, definitely fragile. How this species had survived long enough to reach the stars, she'd never understand. Lift your arms, she instructed, her upper hands gripping the plate's shoulder joints. Hold them at 90 degrees. Do not move. Marcus complied, silent for once, and Krath began the adjustment process. Micro-calibrations really, nothing complex. Loosen the clasp here, tighten the strap there. Check the fit against the collarbone, ensure the weight distribution wouldn't cause pressure injuries during extended wear. Routine. Boring. Just another soft-skinned human who thought he was tough because he'd survived basic training. She reached for the shoulder bracket, her upper right hand brushing against his skin as she adjusted the plate's angle. That's when she saw it. Krath's hand froze mid-adjustment. There, on Marcus's left shoulder, partially hidden beneath where the armor plate would rest, something dark marked his skin. Not a scar, not a birthmark, but something deliberately placed, intricate, detailed. Her compound eyes were focused, pulling the image into sharper clarity. It was art. No, more than that. It was information. Black ink formed shapes and symbols across his deltoid, wrapping slightly around toward his chest. A series of numbers, coordinates maybe. And above them, a stylized image she didn't recognize, angular and aggressive. Below that, words in what she assumed was one of Earth's languages. Sharp letters that seemed to cut across his skin like a challenge. What? she said slowly, her mandibles going still. Is that? Marcus glanced down at his own shoulder as if he'd forgotten it was there. What, the tattoo? That's just my unit marker. Standard stuff. Standard. He'd said standard like it was normal to permanently mark your own flesh. Krath had seen body modification before, piercings and implants and deliberate scarification among warrior cultures, but those served purposes. Identification chips, rank indicators, medical necessity. This was, what? Decoration? She began, then stopped, choosing her words carefully. Her secondary hands continued the armor adjustment on autopilot while her primary hands hovered near the marking. You damaged your skin, deliberately, pushed foreign pigment into your dermal layer. For what? Aesthetics. Not just aesthetics, Marcus said, and there was something in his voice now, something that made Krath's antennae twitch. Each part means something. The numbers are coordinates. The symbol, that's the Recon Marines insignia. The words, well, that's the unit motto. Krath leaned closer, her analytical mind already cataloging details. The ink had depth to it, layers of shading that created dimension. This hadn't been done quickly or carelessly. This had taken hours, multiple sessions, probably based on the coverage and detail work. And the purpose? She asked, her curiosity overriding her usual dismissiveness. This provides no tactical advantage. It offers no protection. If anything, it makes you more identifiable to enemies. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his arms still raised at the required angle, his expression unreadable. The coordinates are where my first squad died. Raid went wrong on a fringe colony. I was the only one who made it out. The words hit Krath like a plasma discharge. Casual, flat, stated like he was reading a maintenance report. She said, her voice coming out rougher than intended. You marked yourself with the location of your unit's death. Yeah. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. Seemed important to remember. The motto underneath, no one left behind. That's what we tell ourselves. Doesn't always work out that way, but you keep trying anyway. Krath's forearms went completely still. Around them, the armor bay's ambient noise, the hum of air recyclers, the distant clang of equipment, all of it faded into background static. She'd fitted hundreds of soldiers, thousands probably. Over her 15 cycles in military service, she'd seen combat injuries, prosthetic replacements, radiation scarring from reactor leaks. But this was different. This was a soldier who'd chosen to carry his failures on his skin. Permanently. Visibly. A reminder he could never remove, never forget, embedded in his own flesh through what must have been considerable pain. Her species didn't do this. The Krell didn't do this. None of the coalition races she'd encountered did this. There's more, isn't there? She asked quietly, her eyes tracing the edges of the visible ink, seeing now how it disappeared beneath where the armor would cover. This is not the only marking you carry. Marcus met her gaze, and for the first time since entering the bay she saw something behind those strange human eyes. Something old. Something heavy. Everyone's got their marks, he said simply. Some are just more visible than others. Krath's mind stuttered, catching on that statement like a broken gear. Everyone's got their marks. Her secondary hands resumed the armor adjustment automatically, muscle memory taking over while her conscious thoughts spiraled elsewhere. Somewhere in the back of her processor-like mind, data she'd previously dismissed suddenly demanded re-examination. 3 weeks ago, the briefing she'd sat through, half listening while running diagnostics on a faulty respirator system. Commander Vrel had been droning on about the human contingent's performance during the Seventh Moon conflict. Numbers, statistics, kill ratios that seemed, what was the human word, inflated, exaggerated. She'd thought it was propaganda. The humans had taken 18% casualties, the commander had said, held their position against a force 3 times their size for 42 hours, refused evacuation until reinforcements arrived. At the time, Krath had clicked her mandibles dismissively. Foolish, reckless, probably embellished for morale purposes. But what if it wasn't? Her eyes flicked back to Marcus's shoulder, to those coordinates, the location of his unit's death, a place he'd chosen to remember, literally forever. Another memory surfaced, unwanted but insistent. 6 months back she'd been requisitioning parts in the station's central supply depot when footage from the Kelvar station siege had played on the public monitors. She'd glanced up, bored, expecting the usual combat recordings. Clean, tactical, the way civilized species fought wars with drones and distance and careful calculation. What she'd seen instead had made her stop mid-requisition. Humans, A squad of maybe 10, in a corridor filled with smoke and emergency lighting. They'd been fighting hand to hand. No, closer than that, grappling with Sarkon shock troops in their own armor. She remembered thinking how insane it was, how suicidal. The Zarkon were ambush predators, 700 pounds of muscle and natural weapons. But the humans hadn't retreated. One of them, she remembered now with crystalline clarity, had lost his weapon, had it literally torn from his hands by a Zarkon's superior strength. And instead of falling back, instead of calling for support, he'd thrown himself at the creature, used his bare hands, his teeth, his forehead, anything available, bought enough time for his squadmate to get a clean shot. The human had survived. Barely. She'd seen him carried out on a stretcher, still conscious, still giving orders. At the time she'd thought it was desperation, panic, poor training. Now, staring at Marcus's tattoo, at the deliberate permanence of it, another interpretation forced itself forward. It wasn't desperation, it was something else entirely. Her mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of processing stress among her people. More memories cascaded forward, each one recontextualizing in real time. The human medic she'd seen treat a Krell soldier during a training accident, working for 6 straight hours without rest, refusing relief until the patient stabilized. Krath had assumed it was duty, professional obligation. The human pilot who'd crashed his fighter into an enemy dreadnought rather than let it reach the evacuation ships, buying civilians 3 extra minutes to escape. She'd read the report, filed it under acceptable losses, moved on. The human engineer who'd gone into an irradiated reactor core with minimal shielding to prevent a meltdown, knowing the exposure would kill him eventually. He'd lived another 4 months, Krath remembered, died in medical, never complained one. Individual incidents, data points, she'd processed them as anomalies, statistical outliers, the occasional crazy soldier every species produced. But what if they weren't outliers? What if this was just what humans were? Her eyes traveled across Marcus's visible skin, looking now for what she'd missed before. There, on his right forearm, another mark, smaller, names, she realized, a list of names in tiny script, his left rib cage partially visible, more ink, a date, maybe, coordinates again. How many marks did he carry? How many deaths? How many failures? How many memories burned into his flesh because forgetting wasn't acceptable? And he stood here calm, arms raised, letting her adjust his armor like this was just another day, like he wasn't carrying a graveyard on his skin. Krath's history education surfaced. Unwelcome. She'd studied Earth during her military academy days. Basic cultural overview. Required reading for coalition integration. Earth's history was violent. Everyone knew that. Humans had spent thousands of years killing each other before they'd finally unified enough to reach space. But the details, the specifics she'd skimmed over, they came back now with uncomfortable clarity. Humans had warfare before they had writing. They'd developed projectile weapons before they'd invented the wheel. They'd created chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons, and then, somehow, pulled themselves back from extinction through sheer stubborn willpower. They'd made it to the stars while still carrying tribal grudges, national identities, religious conflicts that predated their industrial age. And when the coalition had found them, had offered them a place among the peaceful species of the galaxy, they brought all of that history with them. Not as baggage, as tools. Your armor's fitted, Krath heard herself say, her voice sounding distant. The clearance is corrected. Marcus lowered his arms, rolling his shoulders to test the movement. The tattoo disappeared beneath the chest plate. Hidden again, just another secret these humans carried. Thanks, he said. You okay? You look, I don't know the Krell expression, but you look off. I am fine, Krath lied. Just recalculating some assumptions. Marcus didn't move from the platform. He stood there, watching her with those unsettling human eyes, and Krath realized she'd been staring at where his tattoo had disappeared beneath the armor for longer than was professionally appropriate. You want to know about them, don't you? Marcus asked. And it wasn't really a question. The marks. Most species get curious eventually. Krath's mandibles twitched. Professional distance suggested she should decline, send him on his way, move to the next appointment. But her scientific mind, the part that had made her excel in weapons technology, demanded data. The numbers, she said carefully. You said coordinates, but there are multiple sets visible. How many locations do you carry? Marcus glanced down at his shoulder, then at his forearm. 7. Each one's a place where something changed, where I lost someone, Or where I should have died but didn't. The first set, the ones on my shoulder, that's Talos Prime. The ambush I mentioned, 5 good soldiers gone in under 3 minutes. He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was discussing equipment specifications. And you chose to mark yourself with this memory because, Krath pressed, genuinely trying to understand. Because forgetting would be easier, Marcus said quietly, and easier isn't always better. They trusted me to lead them. I made calls that got them killed. That's not something you get to just move past. You carry it. You learn from it. You make sure it means something. The bay doors hissed open again before Krath could respond. 2 more humans entered. One female with dark skin and hair pulled back tight. The other male stockier with visible scarring along his jawline. Webb, you still getting fitted? The woman called. We're supposed to be at the briefing in 20. Almost done, Lieutenant, Marcus replied, then gestured to Krath. Tech specialist here was asking about the ink. The woman, this lieutenant, walked closer, and Krath noticed immediately that her arms were bare below her sleeve line. More marks, different designs, but the same deliberate permanence. Oh yeah. The lieutenant stepped onto an adjacent platform without being asked, already pulling off her shirt to reveal a sports-style underlayer. Which ones? Started with Talos Prime, Marcus said. The lieutenant's expression shifted, something passing between the 2 humans that Krath couldn't quite read. Shared knowledge. Shared pain, maybe. Rough day, that one, the lieutenant said softly. She turned to Krath, extending one arm. This one here. The compass rose with the broken needle. That's from my first deployment, rescue mission that went sideways. We were supposed to extract diplomats from a hostile zone. Instead, we extracted ourselves, barely, and left 3 families behind because command scrubbed the op. Her voice carried weight, heavy and deliberate, like each word cost something to speak. You also marked yourself with failure? Krath asked, the question coming out sharper than intended. Not failure, the lieutenant corrected. Responsibility. I gave the order to withdraw. Right call tactically. Saved my squad. Still think about those families every damn day. The ink makes sure I never forget what command decisions actually cost. The stockier male had moved to another platform, already stripping down for his own fitting. His back, when it came into view, made Krath's breath catch in her respiratory spiracles. The entire surface was covered, not just marked, covered. A massive piece that spread from his shoulders to his lower back. An intricate design of machinery and organic matter intertwined, broken and reformed. Among the abstract art she could pick out words, dates, coordinates, names. So many names. Santos survived a ship decompression, Marcus said, noticing Krath's stare. Entire section blew out. 17 crew lost. He held a manual airlock seal closed for 40 minutes while rescue cut through. Santos rotated slightly, showing the piece better. 43 minutes actually. And I didn't hold it alone. Engineer named Park was with me. She died about minute 35 when the stress fractures spread. Kept her hand on that seal even after. He pointed to a specific section of the tattoo, where mechanical gears seemed to break apart into organic fragments. That part there, that's for her. That's for all of them. Krath's forearms hung uselessly at her sides. 3 humans, 3 bodies marked with permanent reminders of trauma, loss, death. And they spoke about it casually, like discussing the weather, while simultaneously treating each memory with reverence. I do not understand, she admitted, her voice quieter than she'd intended. Your species has technology. Medical reconstruction, psychological conditioning. You could remove these memories, dull the pain, move forward unburdened. Why do you choose to carry this? The 3 humans exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Lieutenant spoke first. Because someone has to remember. Because forgetting dishonors them, Marcus added. Santos turned fully, meeting Krath's compound eyes with his own scarred gaze. Because pain means it mattered, means they mattered. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our weapons or our tactics. It's that we refuse to let go. We hold on to everything, the good and the bad, and we let it fuel us forward. He tapped his chest, right over his heart. Every mark is a promise, a reminder, a reason to be better next time. The station alarm shrieked to life, cutting through the armor bay like a plasma blade. Red emergency lighting flooded the space, rotating in urgent patterns across the walls. Krath's antennae went rigid, her combat training snapping her attention to the overhead speakers. All personnel, combat stations. Hostile vessels detected. Vector 97 Mark III. Unknown configuration, multiple signatures, all combat teams to deployment bays immediately. This is not a drill. The transformation was instantaneous. 1 second. 3 humans standing casually in various states of undress, talking about their scars and their memories. The next, they moved like a single organism. No panic. No hesitation. Just fluid efficiency that bordered on unnatural. Marcus grabbed his shirt, didn't bother putting it on, just tossed it aside and started securing his armor's auxiliary systems. Santos was already fully plating up, his hands moving through connection sequences Krath had seen take other species twice as long. The lieutenant had her communications array online before Krath even processed the first alarm cycle. Webb, Santos, full loadout, double ammunition. The lieutenant snapped, her voice cutting clear and sharp. Hostile unknowns mean we prep for anything. Krath, we need plasma rifles, the heavy variant, and whatever anti-armor ordnance you've got ready. Yes, of course, Krath stammered, her forearms suddenly remembering their purpose. She rushed to the weapons locker, keying in her authorization codes with secondary hands while her primary hands were already pulling rifles from their racks. Behind her, more humans poured into the bay. Dozens of them, the entire rapid response unit apparently, and they moved like water finding cracks. No confusion, no collisions, each one flowing to their designated station, gearing up with practiced speed. Krath had seen military efficiency before. The Crow were famously disciplined. The Vaxxer prided themselves on tactical precision. But this was different. This was choreography born from repetition, from necessity, from a species that had apparently been doing this for so long it was written into their genetic code. She carried 3 plasma rifles back to Marcus, Santos, and the lieutenant, her arms full of weapons that suddenly felt absurdly inadequate. Marcus took his rifle, checked the charge in 2 seconds, slapped in a fresh cell, and primed the firing mechanism. His fingers moved across the weapon like he was born holding it. Maybe he was. Maybe all humans were. Station Armory. This is Lieutenant Chen. The lieutenant was speaking into her comm unit, her voice calm despite the continuing alarms. Human rapid response requesting authorization for breaching charges and close quarters loadout. We don't know what we're facing. Want to be ready for boarding action. Boarding action. They were preparing to fight inside the station, Krath realized, or inside enemy ships. Close quarters. The kind of fighting where her people used drones and automated defenses because the casualty rates were catastrophic. Humans apparently just called it Tuesday. Krath, Marcus said, and she snapped her attention to him. He was fully armored now, the chest plate she'd fitted sitting perfectly across his torso, hiding the tattoo beneath. You did good work on this. Fits perfect. Might keep me alive today. Might. The casual acknowledgement of possible death, spoken while checking ammunition counts. It is standard composite rated for energy dispersion and kinetic impact, Krath heard herself say, her voice sounding mechanical even to her own auditory receptors. But it is not. It was not designed for how humans fight. Marcus paused, looked at her directly. How do you think we fight? Like you have already decided the outcome is worth the cost, Krath said quietly. Like you carry your dead with you and let them make you stronger instead of weighing you down. Like you mark yourselves with failure and call it motivation. Around them the bay had become organized chaos. 50 humans, maybe more. All armored, all armed, all moving toward the deployment corridor with that same unsettling efficiency. Santos clapped Marcus on the shoulder as he passed, heading for the exit. Good luck, brother. Stay low, stay breathing. You too, man. See you on the other side. They said it like a promise. Like they'd fought together before, died together maybe and come back anyway. The lieutenant finished her calm conversation, turned to her unit. All right, listen up. Hostiles are still 20 minutes out. We're taking defensive positions on decks 7 through 9 covering the reactor approach. Standard suppression formations, but stay flexible. Unknown enemy means unknown tactics. Watch each other's backs. Call your shots and remember your training. She paused, her eyes scanning across her soldiers. No one fights alone. No one gets left behind. Are we clear? Clear, Lieutenant. The response came back unified. Absolute. Krath watched them file out. These humans with their marked skin and their casual relationship with death. And she understood with crystalline clarity that she had been very, very wrong about what they were. The armor she'd fitted Marcus suddenly felt like tissue paper. Not because it was inadequate to the task, but because she'd finally seen what task humans actually volunteered for. 4 hours later, Krath stood in the same armor bay, but everything had changed. The hostile force had been Krethian raiders 40 ships strong, thinking a remote coalition station would be easy prey. They'd been wrong. Catastrophically wrong. The battle had lasted 90 minutes before the remaining raiders retreated, leaving 18 of their vessels disabled or destroyed. Human casualties, 12 wounded, 3 critical, 0 dead. Krath had monitored the tactical feeds from her station, watched the helmet camera footage that streamed back in fragmented bursts. She'd seen Marcus and his unit hold a choke point against a boarding party 3 times their size, watched them move through corridors filled with plasma fire like they were dancing, each covering the other with precision that seemed impossible. She'd seen Santos drag a wounded Krell soldier to safety while under direct fire, his back that marked back exposed to enemy weapons while he shielded the injured with his own body. She'd seen Lieutenant Chin coordinate 6 different defensive positions simultaneously while personally engaging hostiles in hand-to-hand combat when they'd breached her command post. Now, the bay was quieter. Medical teams had taken the wounded, the dead raiders had been processed, and the humans were returning, one by one, to strip their damaged armor and prepare for the next threat. Marcus walked in, his chest plate scorched black on one side, a plasma shot that had come close enough to superheat the metal. He was limping slightly, favoring his left leg, but he was walking under his own power. He saw Krath and offered that peculiar human expression, the slight upturn of lips, a smile they called it. Armor held up great, he said, starting to remove the damaged sections. Took a direct hit that should have cooked me. Your fitting probably saved my life. Krath moved to help him, her forearms working automatically to release the seals and catches. When the chest plate came free, the tattoo was visible again. Those coordinates, those names, that promise etched in permanent ink. I understand now, she said quietly, setting the armor aside. Why you mark yourselves. Why you carry it all. Marcus looked at her, waiting. Because your species learns survival by remembering every failure, every loss, every moment you should have died but did not. Krath continued, her voice steady despite the emotional processing happening behind it. Other species move past trauma. You collect it, weaponize it, turn it into fuel. Something like that, Marcus agreed. Makes us dangerous, I guess. No, Krath corrected, her mandibles clicking in what might have been respect. It makes you unstoppable. She watched him leave the bay, that marked human with his graveyard skin and his casual relationship with mortality, and she understood finally what Earth had brought to the Coalition. Not just soldiers, not just warriors, but a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to turn pain into purpose, loss into motivation, death into meaning. The tattoos were not decorations. They were warnings. They were promises written in flesh and ink that said, we remember, we carry, we endure. And that Krath realized as she turned back to her workstation, preparing for the next soldier who would need fitting, the next marked human who would walk calmly toward death because someone had to. That was the most terrifying and beautiful thing she had ever witnessed. The station hummed around her, safe for now, protected by soldiers who wore their failures like armor and their grief like weapons. Krath clicked her mandibles softly and pulled up the next duty roster. More humans tomorrow. Always more humans. She found herself looking forward to it,